I'm missing being able to hold her, cuddle her, and just say everything's all right. And I just want her back, wherever she is. Joe, my little Joe, come back. And if anybody's got her, don't keep her. Give her back to us. We miss her so much. I know that's obvious.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Wherever you may be in the world right now, hello, my name's Lloyd, and you're watching When Evil Follows. On April the 19th in the year of 1985, a loving mother gave birth to a healthy and happy baby girl named Joanna. Joanna was born in Hampshire, in England, and her parents, Teresa and David Yates, loved her very dearly. David Yates was a brilliant father who loved his daughter fiercely. Teresa Yates was a very kind and confident woman, and she was also a very protective mother. Both Teresa and David would make sure Joanna had everything she needed when she was growing up, giving her a warm and loving, fun-filled childhood. She attended private schooling and would eventually continue her education at university, studying towards a degree in landscape architecture. And not long after Joanna graduated, she would soon find the perfect career within the field of landscape architecture. And in this new job, this new career, she would meet a man called Greg Reardon. Joanna and Greg, they hit it off straight away, and they got on like a house on fire. And they had so much in common as well, and both Greg and Joanna would begin sharing time out of work, and eventually they would fall for each other, and of course, this would grow into a relationship. They were really happy together, and Joanna's parents both thought very highly of Greg, and they really thought that he was the right one for their daughter. The one who would put a ring on her finger and give her that beautiful happy ever after. Joanna was a polite and pleasant person, and she was always so positive and outgoing. She really was quite a bubbly character, and she had this amazing vibe. She would enjoy time out with her friends from work, and she was highly popular with all that knew her. Now, the company both Greg and Joanna worked for had recently signed a new contract, meaning the company would have to relocate to the city of Bristol. Greg and Joanna, who worked for the same company, they clearly loved their job role so much. They simply didn't want to give up their position within the company, and so they both decided to follow the company, keep their jobs, and move to Bristol. Greg and Joanna were adventurous anyway, and their relationship had grown sweetly, and so they both made a conscious decision to find a house in Bristol, one where they could both move into. And once they found their perfect property, they moved in together. Joanna was seriously excited about the whole adventure, moving into a new area, with a new city to explore and to have her own independence. She was really enjoying buying the furniture for the property and decorations, and she was excited for hers and her partner's future together. Now, as we know, Christmas time is about spending time with your family, and the time leading up to Christmas is always busy. And that was the same for Joanna and Greg, attending work meetings, work parties, more work meetings. Oh, guys, you know how it can be. Christmas time can be mayhem and carnage. However, on the 17th of December in 2010, Greg Reardon, he made up his mind that he was going to spend the weekend in Sheffield, as that's where most of his family lived, and that's where many of his family members are from. Good old Sheffield. Joanna supported Greg's decision, though she did make it very clear that she would be a little nervous without him. She's alone, she's in a new city, a new area, a new home, and so Greg reassured her that he'd be back real soon, and that it was only for the weekend, and that he'd be back before she even knew it. And with that, Greg got his things together. He packed his bag and he hugged Joanne tightly, told her that he loved her, and then set off on his journey to Sheffield. And so Joanna finished her morning coffee, got dressed, and then went to work as always. Once Joanna got to work, her co-workers could see that there was something wrong with Joanna. She wasn't her normal happy self. She seemed anxious about having to face the weekend alone. And so her work colleagues, they reassured her that everything was going to be okay, and they invited her out for a couple of drinks at the local pub. Joanna accepted because it probably beats staying at home alone, I guess. And once Joanna was at the pub with her friends, she felt relaxed. She was smiling, laughing and having fun, having a great time. Everything was fine. It was now starting to fall dark out and starting to get a little late, and so Joanna decided to set off back home. She gave hugs to her friends and said her farewells and then set off on her walk back home. Now at this point, Greg had made it safely to Sheffield and was now with his family, and so he decided to text Joanna just to make sure that she was okay. But he didn't get a response, and a little later on in the evening he sent another text saying, "Good night, I love you," and he went to bed. Greg woke up bright and early in the morning, as always, and he checked his phone and there was still no reply from Joanna, and so he assumed that maybe she was still in bed sleeping, and that's why she hadn't texted him back yet. But as the day continued, Greg would realise that she wasn't responding to any of the text messages he sent, and so he rang her phone, and her phone would ring and ring and then go straight to the answering phone. Greg decided to leave a voice message saying that he misses her and he loves her and he hopes that she slept okay, and to give him a call whenever she gets the chance to do so. But there was no response. There was nothing, no text messages, no phone calls, no emails, no nothing. Greg then returned home from Sheffield slightly earlier than planned, but when he got home he realised that the front door wasn't locked, and so he opened the door without using his key and walked inside. And once inside he realised that Joanna wasn't even home, and that's when Greg would start to fear that maybe something bad has happened. And so immediately he pulls out his phone and he decided to give Joanna another call, and so he calls her phone when all of a sudden he hears her phone ringtone coming from inside their home. Gripped with worry, he follows the sound into the bedroom, and there in the cupboard hanging up was Joanna's coat, and in the pocket was her phone, still ringing, and in the other pocket of her coat, Greg found her house keys and her purse. And by this point, panic mode was setting in, because he knew that she would never just up and leave the family home without taking her keys, her mobile phone, and especially without taking her purse. And so, trying to think calmly and clearly, his first line of action was to ring Joanna's parents to see if maybe they've heard anything from her or if they knew where she could possibly be. And after he explained everything to her parents, they just simply said no, and that they haven't had any communication with her since before the weekend. It was clearly obvious that this wasn't Joanna's character and that something wasn't right. And that's when Joanna's parents told Greg to put the phone down, ring the police and report her as missing. And then as soon as the phone call ended, he reported his girlfriend to the police as missing. After the report was made, the police arrived and began speaking to Greg, asking him questions, gaining as much information from him as possible. And then after that, they started to look around the home for anything that might stand out, any kind of clues. And that's when police would find in the same coat pocket where the phone was found a clue. The police found a receipt for a pizza that was purchased from Tesco. On the receipt was information indicating that the pizza was bought at 8:45 p.m. on the same night that Joanna was last seen, strongly suggesting that Joanna did indeed make it home safely that Friday evening and then went missing after she returned home. The strange thing is that there was no evidence anywhere to be seen of this pizza, no evidence to suggest that it was placed in the fridge, and no evidence to suggest that it had been cooked. There was no dirty oven tray that had been used, and there was no pizza packet placed in the bin, as the bin was still full, with no sign of the pizza box inside. It was like somebody just walked into the property and taken the pizza. The police continued their search within the property, looking for anything, on the off chance that they might be able to find another clue that would help the police with their lines of inquiries and investigations. And it was at this point in time when Joanna's parents turned up. They'd both driven all the way from Hampshire to Bristol, completely overwhelmed with worry. Understandably, they wanted to help in the search efforts for their daughter, and they had questions, and they needed answers. Now the police were inside the property searching for clues, whilst Greg and Joanna's parents were outside, searching the front garden for anything that looked odd, that stood out, anything that indicated any signs of a struggle. And as they were outside searching for clues, Greg and Joanna's parents noticed a couple hand in hand, walking up the street towards them. The couple approached, walking closer, until Greg recognised them both as the sweet couple who lived next door, Vincent Tabak and his loving girlfriend Tanya. And so Greg said hello, and because it was winter time near Christmas, Tanya wished them all a happy Christmas and asked why they were all outside, because it was freezing out. Both Teresa and David explained to the couple that they were looking for their daughter, who had suddenly disappeared, and that everyone was full of worry, and that everyone was out looking for her. And so the couple kindly said, "Well, we really hope you find her soon, as it's far too cold to be out in this weather. It's freezing, and should you need anything, please, don't hesitate to ask. We only live next door." Now at this point, the police needed as much information on Joanna's personality and on her private lifestyle as much as they could possibly get. And by talking to Greg and then asking similar questions to both of the parents, the police were able to gather enough information in order to start to build an accurate, solid character profile. The police needed to know absolutely everything about this woman, starting with her work life and her friends, the dynamics of her private relationship with Greg, who she confides in the most, what makes her laugh, her pet likes, and even her unchecked bucket list of places yet to travel. You name it, they wanted to know it all, everything and anything at this point, as it was important to the police at this stage in their investigations. And given the fact that Joanna didn't suffer with any sort of depression or mental health issues, and that there was no other simple reason for why she would just want to run away, she was very happy with her life and very much so looking forward to her future. And it's completely not in her character to just simply disappear without not texting or telling anyone. The police believe that something could have happened to Joanna at her home, and that maybe she had opened the door and possibly invited somebody into her home who she knew, or that somebody potentially could have just walked in and taken her somewhere, and maybe, quite possibly, against her free will. And so the police opened up a missing persons appeal on live national TV in hopes that somebody somewhere might come forward with new information on the whereabouts of Joanna Yates.
I believe Joanna reached her home address on Friday evening, and this would have been at some time shortly after 8:30 p.m. in the evening. This is because we have found within the flat her coat, her mobile phone and keys. I know that from CCTV she went to Tesco's in Clifton Village and she purchased a pizza. I have here a pizza which is similar in all respects to the one we believe she purchased, which is a Tesco's finest tomato, mozzarella and basil pesto pizza. Within the flat we can find no evidence of this pizza or any of the wrappings. And so I would like to make an appeal, firstly for anyone who has any information about where Joanna is now, or any information about this that can indicate what's happened to her. But I'd also like to make an appeal for anyone who knows where this pizza is, or whether any of the wrappings are, or where the box is.
First of all, can you just tell me a little bit about her, describe her to me?
She loved doing things with a boyfriend, she liked doing things around the home, she liked making a home, buying things for the home. She was a really loving daughter.
I was going to say, clearly you're so distraught about this. What is it that you are missing most at the moment? Can I ask you, Mrs. Yates?
I'm missing being able to hold her, and cuddle her, and just say everything's all right. And I just want her back, wherever she is. Joe, my little Joe, come back. And if anybody's got her, don't keep her, give her back to us. We miss her so much. I know that's obvious, and nobody can feel the pain that we feel.
And despite this appeal being made by the police and family members on local TV evening news, nobody came forward. Fast forward just 8 days, and the date is now the 25th of December, Christmas Day. A couple was out walking their dog. They walked off the main road and they headed down a country path called the Woodlands. They walked about halfway down this country path, and at the side of the road next to a crumbling down wall was this odd peculiar shape that was covered over in snow. Now the couple, they didn't realise what it was until they got a little bit closer. And once they did walk a little bit closer, they noticed that there was something quite strange. And so they both slowly approached this strange snow mound, only to find that what they were actually looking at was a human foot. They were also fully aware that a young local woman had recently disappeared, and they immediately felt unsure and uncomfortable about the situation, and so they rang the police and reported their disturbing discovery. The police arrived, and then it only took them just a few moments to confirm that it was indeed a human female body, and the only person reported missing at this moment in time was, of course, Joanna. And so, on Christmas morning at around 10 AM, the police asked Joanna's parents to come down to the hospital to identify the female body. And on Christmas morning at 11:45 AM, the body that was found in the snow was of course officially identified as missing local female Joanna Yates. Joanna's body would be taken in for an in-depth autopsy to try and figure out the cause of her death. Her body was still fully clothed, however she had no shoes on and her left sock was missing. Her shoes would be found back at her apartment, which strongly suggested that she was taken either dead or alive from her home, wearing no footwear. And because her left sock was missing, forensics and detectives that were working this case believed that maybe the killer had taken the sock as some kind of sick trophy. And there was also well over 42 wounds found on her body, with deep internal severe bruising. However, most of the internal bruising was around her neck. Strongly indicates that whoever did put their bare hands around Joanna's neck began to strangle her very slowly, increasing their intensity of their grip, prolonging her suffering, pain and fear. The police and forensic pathologist also believed that whoever did this to Joanna wanted to toy with her demise whilst watching her life slowly leave her body instead of just killing her instantly. And so at this point, the police stepped up their case from a missing persons inquiry to a much more serious and intense murder investigation. So obviously when a missing persons inquiry steps up to become a murder investigation, the whole situation completely intensifies and the dynamics of the investigation change. And so one of the first actions detectives took was to collect as much public CCTV footage as possible, taken from the night Joanna was last seen alive. Now, hours upon hours upon hours of footage was closely analysed and slowly pieced together. This footage clearly shows Joanna walking down the street. She then walks into a Tesco store and buys a pizza. With pizza in hand, she then leaves the store, and once outside she continues to walk in the same direction towards her home. Now at this time, detectives were analysing all of the CCTV video footage. The police who were working this case, they re-interviewed everybody, and that included everybody they had already previously spoken to. However, this time around the police would interview work employees, work colleagues, family members and her neighbours. A team of police officers assigned to the case would begin searching the city, even looking in public bins and wooded areas, just in case they found a clue of some sort. Both of Joanna's neighbours were also interviewed by police in their own homes. And it was during these intense investigations the police found out that Joanna didn't actually buy a home, and that she never had a mortgage, when, in fact, she was actually renting her apartment, and that a landlord was actually living just above Joanna's apartment. And get this, he only had the keys to Joanna's property. When the police interviewed the landlord, he told the police on the 17th of November he was home alone, and that he was reading a book and he went to bed quite early, as he was feeling quite unwell. He also claimed that he also keeps a key to all of his properties that he rents out, purely on the grounds that should the circumstances change or if a tenant loses their keys, he can then come down and let them back in, and get another key cut from the master key. Yeah, it's just very suspicious, but at the same time it does sound kinda believable, I guess, especially if you're a landlord by trade. This investigation gained massive attention both online and on TV. In fact, it was one of the biggest police investigations ever undertaken within the Bristol area, and even the BBC Crime Watch made a reconstruction of Joanna's last known movements, all in the hope that somebody somewhere would remember something, but nothing came to light. And that's when the social media giants announced a public press conference. Yeah, just days later they would offer a staggering £60,000 to anyone who comes forward with information leading to the arrest and conviction of those responsible for the murder of Joanna Yates. The police were by now clearly running out of ideas, and you know what they really needed was a suspect. And so they went back over everything, re-looking at all of the circumstances. Now, when Greg first reported coming home from Sheffield, he told the police that he found the door to the property unlocked and that Joanna was nowhere to be seen, which kind of gets me thinking, who could have just potentially let themselves into the property, and who could have possibly known that Greg's car wasn't on the drive, and known that Greg wasn't going to be home, leaving Joanna vulnerable? Couldn't be the landlord. Could it? Well, the police seem to believe it was, and on the 30th of December 2010 at 6 o'clock AM in the morning, they knocked on the landlord's door, and of course he came to the door still half asleep, and the police arrested him there and then, under suspicion for Joanna Yates' murder. They then took him down to the police station for intense interrogation, whilst at the same time a team of forensic criminal investigators inspected his apartment from top to bottom, looking in his bathroom, checking his bedroom, taking fingerprints from door handles. You name it, they were looking for it. So, who is this landlord? I hear you all shouting. Okay, I feel you. So, the landlord was no other than Mr. Christopher Jeffries. He's a retired school teacher who used to work at Clifton School for almost 30 years, before taking early retirement. Now, Christopher was somewhat of an eccentric character, who would keep himself to himself, and he didn't have many friends, and he wasn't the sort of person who would watch TV. And given his shabby appearance and the fact that he did have a key to Joanna's property, I gotta say it does make him look pretty sinister. Now, Christopher, after a full day of intense interrogation, was still claiming his innocence. And no matter how hard the police tried to press him for a full confession, it was no good. Christopher didn't waver, and after 24 hours of being told to confess, the outcome remained the same. However, the police were still convinced that Christopher was responsible for this heinous crime, and on the 30th of December, senior police officer applied to the magistrates for a further holding extension, which was granted that same day. This meant that the police investigators were now able to detain Christopher as a suspect for a further 24 hours. Now, while all this was taking place, the TV news reporters and newspapers, they have obviously been following this case right from the very beginning. They knew the name of the suspect, Christopher Jeffries, and they knew that he was arrested under suspicion of Joanna's murder. And yeah, they quickly named and shamed Christopher to the public as the killer. They literally branded him as the murderer on the cover of every newspaper in the UK, using large photographs of Christopher with the words such as the face of evil, the most evil man, calling him a peeping Tom, and other sexual claimed slurs. In fact, the police and the UK press had already sentenced Christopher as being guilty because he was a loner and odd and mysteriously sinister looking. On the 31st of the same month, the forensic reports came back to the police, and with fingerprints taken from Christopher's home, simply gave no evidence to suggest that Joanna was ever in his property, and there was also no evidence to suggest that Christopher was not being honest about his whereabouts on the 17th of December, and after a long 72 emotional hours, Christopher Jeffries was finally released from police custody on bail. Now, with all the hype and airtime this murder case had gathered over the last couple of weeks, one of Joanne's neighbours made a surprising phone call to the police in Bristol from the Netherlands. The neighbour was on family Christmas holiday watching the case unfold on TV news. Because he knew Christopher Jeffries is a potential suspect, he thought it was important to tell the police what he knows. The neighbour was 32-year-old engineer Vincent Tabak, and he lived with his girlfriend Tanya in the flat next door to Joanna and Greg. So Joanna's neighbour, Vincent, told the police that the night when Joanna went missing, he noticed that Christopher Jeffries' car was parked on the drive, facing the wall. And then when he looked out the window just an hour or so later, he noticed that Jeffries' car was now parked facing the road and slightly further on down the driveway, assuring the police that Jeffries was definitely 100% out and about in his car that same night Joanna disappeared. And so armed with this new information, the police seized Jeffries' car. They took the car to the forensic centre just outside of Bristol for an extensive inspection, starting with microfibres, blood, skin, hair, any kind of DNA, fingerprints, you name it. They were looking for it. Anything that could incriminate or link Jeffries to Joanna's murder. And after 32 hours, the police forensic team, they finally found nothing. And so with that, his car was returned and he was finally acquitted from all charges and his name was cleared from the investigation altogether. And it was round about this time when the investigation was now starting to turn cold. And that's when the detectives working this case would refocus their attention back to the eyewitness caller, the neighbour, Vincent Tabak. The police found it very suspicious that Vincent had told the police that Christopher was out and about that night. The police felt like he was trying to pin false evidence on Jeffries, and so with no time to waste, detectives in Bristol arranged to send 2 police officers over to Amsterdam to meet up with Vincent to question him in connection with this murder case. Now when police officers met up with Vincent Tabak, police officers found him to be acting quite nervous. He also seemed to be very concerned about the intimate information regarding the murder case. The officers felt like something wasn't quite right with this guy, especially with the way he was acting. The police officers then asked Vincent if he wouldn't mind submitting a DNA sample. They explained to Vincent that this was just a standard procedure in a high-profile case such as this, and that there was nothing to worry about. However, Vincent Tabak, he refused. And so once again, the officers explained it would only take a short while and that the sample isn't going to hurt, it's just a quick mouth swab. Now before we go any further, I just want to tell you a little bit more about Vincent Tabak and his history. Both his parents were Dutch and he was born in the year of 1978 in the Netherlands. He did well at school and he moved to the UK in 2007 with a thirst for education. He enrolled at Bath University, graduating and walking away with a degree in engineering. He got a job as an electrical engineer, and it was at this point when he met his girlfriend Tanya on a dating app. Their relationship grew, they moved in together in Bristol and set up house and home together, next door to Joanna and Greg. And with all that being said, let's get back to the timeline. The police had been patiently waiting to receive Vincent Tabak's mouth swab and DNA sample, where it was very quickly sent away for testing against DNA evidence police had already collected from the case. And hey ho, what do you know? Vincent Tabak's DNA would be found on 5 items of evidence. His DNA sample was found on Joanna's clothing, especially on her jeans. There are also little tiny fibres found on Joanna's clothing that match the inside of Vincent Tabak's car boot, strongly suggesting that Vincent Tabak would have had Joanna's body out of her home and then put in the boot of his car. And on the 20th of January in the year of 2011, detectives arrested Vincent Tabak at his flat on suspicion of murdering Joanna Yates, where he was then taken to the police station for further questioning. And at the same time, forensics searched Vincent Tabak's home for further evidence. And what they found on his laptop was enough evidence to suggest that finally the police had found their right man. Found on his computer was a full search history of Google Maps. However, what made this evidence much more compelling was the fact that he actually Google searched this lane just 2 days before Joanna's body was actually found. By this time, police forensic examiners now believe that it's highly likely that Joanna's body was dumped on Longwood Lane on that same night she went missing. And the police also found on his laptop non-stop search efforts of Joanna Yates' news updates, suggesting paranoia, purely because her body had been found, and Vincent wanted to figure out how to stay one step ahead of the murder investigation. And by knowing from TV media, poor Christopher Jeffries, who at the time was the police's main suspect, Vincent saw this as the perfect opportunity to pin the murder on Christopher Jeffries, and that's why Vincent made a phone call to the police with false evidence. He saw his chance to get away with murder, or so he thought. The police also found on his laptop a long search history of hours upon months even, of violent pornography. Yeah, Vincent Tabak got off sexually on graphic, violent porn movies towards women. The movies he fantasised over involved women having intercourse with men whilst being strangled at the same time, often more than not resulting in the woman's death. Although he never shared his fantasy either with his girlfriend, family members or friends, a dark part of his sexual persona that he kept well hidden. And if that wasn't sick enough, the police also found a hidden file on his laptop containing over 150 sexual graphic photographs of young children. And on January the 22nd, just 2 days after he was originally arrested, Vincent Tabak was charged with murder of Joanna Yates. He was also charged separately for having sexual indecent images of young minors on his computer, and was imprisoned until his court hearing. And it would be the following year, on the 5th of May, when Vincent Tabak took to the stand at Bristol City County Court and pleaded guilty to manslaughter, claiming that it was all an accident. Yeah, unbelievably, he told the court that he was walking past the window and saw Joanna, recognised her as the neighbour, and she waved him on inside. Joanna then started flirting with him, and Vincent went to kiss her. But Joanna started freaking out and screaming, and Vincent, he was trying to stop her from screaming, and so he put his hand over her face and accidentally strangled her to death. However, Vincent Tabak wasn't able to give any logical answers as to why Joanna had over 45 injuries to her body. There was injuries to her arms, both of her legs, her torso, her neck, including a broken nose. And although he still maintained his innocence, fortunately the Crown judge and jury, they were not born straight out of a Cadbury's cream egg, and so they sentenced him accordingly. And on the 28th of October that same year, Vincent Tabak was sentenced to spend the rest of his worthless natural life at the HMP prison in Winchester. And after being found guilty on first-degree murder, on the 2nd of March, years later in 2015, he pleaded guilty to the possession of over 150 indecent images of children, where he would be sentenced for a further 10 months to add on to his life sentence. Vincent Tabak was transferred from Winchester Prison in April in the year of 2022 and is now serving time in a maximum security prison in Wakefield, hopefully to never be seen ever again. Joanna Yates was one amazing and loving, kind woman who would often put other people before herself. She loved her friends and family, and she was highly educated with a promising future to look forward to that she loved. Sadly, she now leaves a big hole in the hearts of many who knew and loved her. My thoughts and prayers remain with the Yates family, and may Joanna rest in peace. Hey guys, I really hope you enjoyed this case. Please hit the like button and consider subscribing to the channel if you haven't already. Also hit the bell, that way you'll get notifications every time we upload a new video. So what do you think to this case? Should Vincent have got more time? Me, personally, I believe life means life. And what a disgusting pervert having those pictures on his laptop. Let me know what you think about this case in the comment section below. And with that being said, guys, look after yourself and stay safe. And I'll see you all again the next time when evil follows. Bye.